Okay, so a quadratic equation is in the form of a quadratic, as you already know from the first video or the first chapter, ax squared plus bx plus c. But this is equal to 0, and when we want to solve it, we want to find the values of x in which will allow this to equal to 0. So we're going to use an example throughout all of this. Let's use 3x squared minus 13x minus 10, which is obviously equal to 0. And we need to find the values of x in which this would be equal to 0. So there are 4 techniques that you can use to find the x values for when this is true. There are 4 ways in order to solve this. The first way, by far the best way, is by using a calculator, the ClassWiz calculator. I went over this in the last video, but I'll go over it again quickly. If you turn on your calculator and press menu, you go all the way down to the A box, which is equation/func. You press equals on it, you press 2 for polynomial, and you press 2 for a second degree polynomial. It will come up with a blank quadratic. If you put in the right coefficient, so in this example we would put 3 as the x squared coefficient, you press equals in order to put the coefficient in. You put minus 13 as the x coefficient and the last digit as minus 10. It will give you 2 values of x. X is equal to 5 and x is equal to minus 2 over 3. And those are your 2 values of x. You don't need to do any more of that. That's why it's so quick to do. It's definitely the best method. Quadratic equations won't always have 2 solutions. Sometimes they will have 1 solution. The way you're able to tell this on your calculator is that the x will not have a little number next to it. It will just be x equals, and if you press equals looking for the second solution, it will bring you straight to the min of y equals ax squared, etc. It is also possible for a quadratic equation to have 0 solutions or 0 real solutions. The way the calculator will say this is if you press equals on the equation you've inserted and it comes up with an I in one of your solutions for x, that means there are no solutions or no real solutions for x. The second way to do it is factorisation. Now, to be honest, there isn't really much use of doing it this way because you might as well just put it into the calculator. But I'll go over it quickly. Obviously, we went over it in the previous video, which was chapter 1. So we'll write out the equation again, which is 3x squared minus 13x minus 10 is equal to 0. So remember, we need to find 2 values that times together to give AC. So in this example, it would be minus 30, and we need to get 2 numbers that add together to give B, which would be minus 13. And these values, if you think about it, would be minus 15 and 2. So we can write down the quadratic equation as 3x squared minus 15x plus 2x minus 10 is equal to 0. And then what we can do is we can factor this as much as possible with the 2 separate identities. So the first bit, we can factor out 3x. So we can factor out 3x and say x minus 5. And for the second bit, we can factor out 2 and say x minus 5, and that's equal to 0. And then we can simplify this more to create the first bracket as x minus 5, and we create the remaining bracket as 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. Now what this is actually saying, I'm going to do this over here to get a bit more space. What this is actually saying is these 2 numbers times together to equal 0. The only possible way that those 2 numbers can times together to equal 0 is if one of them or both of them is equal to 0. And the way that would be is, so if x minus 5 was equal to 0, x would equal 5. And if 3x plus 2 was equal to 0, then 3x would be equal to minus 2. That means x would be equal to minus 2 over 3. So those are your 2 solutions. But just to emphasize, there's no real point in using this method because you can just put it in the calculator, so much easier. So the third way of solving this quadratic equation is doing something called completing the square. So before I do this, I want to show you a little trick that is the basis of completing the square. Let's take x squared plus 8x. So let's take on a separate note x plus 4 squared. Let's expand this, so it would be x plus 4, and that would be x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16, which we can simplify to x squared plus 8x plus 16. Let's compare these two things, x squared plus 8x plus 16 and x squared plus 8x. The only difference between them is this plus 16. So in essence, the only difference between x squared plus 8x and x plus 4 squared, when you expand x plus 4 squared, is this plus 16. So what you can actually do is you can write x squared plus 8x as x plus 4 squared minus 16. Because remember, if you minus the 16 over here, you've just got x squared plus 8x. So that's what this is showing here. X squared plus 8x equals x plus 4 squared minus 16. And this is the basis of completing the square, is that you can write x squared plus 8x as x plus half of this number here, which is 4, minus the square of this number. Okay, so in essence we can write this in more general form as x squared plus 2ax is equal to x plus a squared minus a squared. This is a really useful identity when we're talking about completing the square. So how do we actually go about solving the equation using completing the square? Well, the first step is that we need to divide everything by a. So remember that a is the coefficient of x squared if we do it in the form ax squared minus plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So we need to divide everything by a. So in this example we need to divide everything by 3. So that'd be x squared minus 13 over 3x minus 10 over 3 is equal to 0. That's the first step. The second step is we need to move c to the other side. C, remember, is the lone digit, it would be the minus 10 over 3. So in order to do that, we just do x squared minus 13 over 3x is equal to 10 over 3. Now the third step is sort of the traditional completing the square trick, and it's going to be using the tip from the slide before. We've made this expression now, and using the tip from the slide before, remember we can write this as x minus 13 over 6 squared, because remember the 13 over 3 needs to be divided by 2 or halved in order to make this apply, so the 13 over 6, and then we need to minus the square of this number, which should be 169 over 36. Really quick, you might be questioning about the minus, whether we need to change the sign. We don't, because this is a theme that comes up constantly at A level. When you square a minus number, it is a positive number, 169 over 36. Likewise, obviously, if you square the positive number, it becomes 169 over 36. They're the same answer. So if it's plus or minus, it doesn't matter. You still need to minus 169 over 36 in order to get rid of the number produced here. Remember, this will be all equal to 10 over 3. The fourth step is to bring the minus 169 over 36 onto the other side. So you're going to do this by x minus 13 over 6 squared is equal to 10 over 3 plus 169 over 36, which is equal to 289 over 36 if you use the calculator. So just to rewrite this if it's a bit complicated, x minus 13 over 6 squared is equal to 289 over 36. The fifth step is to square root both sides. So if we square root the left hand side, it's easy, it's going to be x minus 13 over 6. If we square root the right hand side, it's going to be the square root of 289 over 36. But it's going to be plus or minus because of what I talked about before. If you square root a positive number, there are two possible answers: the positive square root or the negative square root. This is a theme that constantly comes up at A level, so it's very important to remember. And the square root of 289 over 36 is actually 17 over 6, so it's the plus or minus of this. And the sixth step is just to make x the subject. So in order to do this, you would bring the minus 13 over 6 on the other side. So x is equal to plus or minus 17 over 6 plus 13 over 6. This gives two values of x. One when it's positive 17 over 6, so it'll be x equals 17 over 6 plus 13 over 6, which will be equal to 30 over 6, which will be equal to 5. And the second solution is when it's minus 17 over 6, so it'd be minus 17 over 6 plus 13 over 6, which would be minus 4 over 6, which would be equal to minus 2 over 3. So those are the two solutions, and that's how you get them using completing the square.